Okay, let's get started. We're going to begin with a large curve. Our curve is going to be on a diagonal. For example, we're going to begin our curve a little bit more than a hand width from the top, and we're going to end with only about 4 fingers width left between the line and the top of the paper. Notice how far back I'm holding on the pencil. If I hold back farther and use more of my wrist, I can get a bigger curve. Whereas if I hold closer to the tip, this is more for fine details like writing your name and can make it really awkward to draw a large shape. So again, make sure you hold back further on your pencil. You can also turn your paper as you draw your curve. This is a little bit more natural than trying to bend your wrist to make the curve. I can see that on the right, it ended up being a little bit wider than I meant for it to. So I'm actually going to fix it first, and then I'm going to go ahead and erase. Sometimes when I erase first, my brain wants me to keep drawing over that line that's already there. So I'm going to go ahead and fix it, reminding myself of what not to do, and then I'll go ahead and erase my mistake. Now I'm going to draw the first line for the eyelid. And we're going to begin about 1 finger width from the edge. We're going to dip down just a little bit, and once we get about 1/3 of the way over, we're going to bump up and curve off the edge, and we're going to bring that line over about 3 fingers width from the edge of the curve. Next, we'll turn this line into a shape by adding another line. We're going to keep them close together in the corners, and they're going to get wider in the middle. Once we've made a shape, we're going to split it into 2 by adding a line right down the middle. Then we're going to add another line inside of the curve. We're going to leave them about 1 finger width apart, and we're going to turn the paper as we work, holding back further on our pencil. Next, we'll add a curve on each side to make the shape in the middle more of a circle. We want both of these curves to curve inward. Now for the pupil. The pupil is the black center of the eye. It's also the light receptor. On humans, it's circular, whereas on cats, it might be more like this shape. On snakes, it can be more of a crescent moon shape. Because we're doing dragons, we can get very creative with the shape of our pupil. We can also have some fun with adding the highlights. The highlights can come in many different shapes. They could be a curved triangle, they could be a diamond, a jelly bean shape, or circles. Go ahead and take a moment to pick your favorite. Next, we're going to add one more line below the eyelid. We're going to connect from our upper eyelid, and we're going to curve all the way around, turning our paper and holding back farther on our pencil until we get to the other side. Now we can add some spikes. We can either add them by adding triangles to the back of our eyelid, or if we want them to look like they're actually overlapping with the eyelid, like in this picture, we're going to go ahead and curve and connect each one. Then we'll erase where the line shows through. You only want to do this if you drew really light and you think your pencil marks won't show. You could keep your spikes more straight triangles, or you could curve them like I did on this one. Now it's time to add a few more lines. We're going to follow along with the natural curve of the top of our eyelid. So I'll just bring that right down in a curve. Then we'll do the same on the other side. Because the corner of the eyelid is curving down, we'll continue following that line off the edge of the paper. Since we still have a lot of space left, we're going to add another line about 3 fingers width away from that one. And again, we're going to follow that same curve. If I have space left, I can add one more, again following the same curve and staying about 3 fingers width apart. I don't think I have room in that corner, but I can go ahead and check the other one. And it looks like I can add a little bit of a line here. Next, we will repeat those same steps on the bottom in each corner. Again, staying about 3 fingers width away and following the curve. This time, I'm going to curve down towards the bottom of the paper. And finally, I'll do the same thing to the other side. If my spikes are in the way of my line, I'll just bump and jump to the other side. That way, I'm not drawing through them. If there's room, I can add one more line again into each corner. Now we're going to use lines and shapes to add some visual or implied texture. Texture is the way something feels or looks like it feels. Let me show you how you can do this in your picture. One way that we can add visual texture is to use lines. Make sure that each line touches the top and the bottom so that we are creating a trapped shape. You can also use shapes to create your texture. Place them close together and draw them nice and big. They should get a little bit smaller as they get closer to the corners. I've shown you an example of way that you can add lines and shapes, but you can add whichever lines and shapes you would like. Just remember, you want to keep them nice and big because we're going to go ahead and color these in later. You also want each of your shapes to touch the top and the bottom. Once you're done with pencil, go ahead and Sharpie outline. Everything you've drawn with pencil should be gone over with Sharpie. Don't forget to add some extra line weight by making some areas thicker. You can also color in any area that you can't fit a finger in. Those areas will be just a little bit too small to blend later on. I decided to leave the corners of my eye white for this piece because I have a black outline around my iris. For this one, I didn't have that, so I went ahead and colored them in solid black. Don't forget to leave your highlights nice and white. Once you're done with the Sharpie, you should always go back and erase any pencil marks that still show. Now we're ready to add color to the iris, which is that circle in the middle of the eye. For the iris today, we're going to be using analogous color blending. Analogous colors are colors that are near each other on the color wheel. For example, violet, and red are next to each other on the color wheel. However, blue, green, and yellow have one color in between each of them, yet they are still analogous colors because they are near each other. What you don't want to mix are complementary colors. Complementary colors are opposite on the color wheel. So for example, yellow and purple would not be good colors to mix. Go ahead and choose 2 or 3 colors to blend on your eye. I will show you an example of crayon, marker, and watercolor blending. Today you're going to work with your darkest colors on the outside and you're going to work inward to your lighter colors. For this example, I chose to use blue-green, green, and yellow-green, but you can use whichever 2 or 3 analogous colors you'd like. You may even want to test them out on a placemat before you use them. Here I'm taking my darkest color and I'm pressing down nice and hard around the edges. Then I will go back in with a lighter layer where I don't press down quite as hard. Now it's time to add in my second color. Remember, I'm working from dark around the outside edges and then lighter in towards the pupil. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my green. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down really hard where I overlap a little bit with that blue-green. And then I'll do the same thing I did with the blue-green, and I'll add a little bit of a light layer that I can mix with my yellow-green later. Now I'm ready for my lightest color, which in this case is my yellow-green. I'm going to press hard down around the pupil, and then I'm going to overlap a little bit with my green. When you blend two colors that are crayon, make sure that you swirl a little bit where the two colors meet. Swirling will make sure that the two colors blend really nicely. If you don't have crayons, you can use washable markers. First, start by using your lighter color inside around the iris. Then, move into your darker color. Be sure to make sure that with that darker color, you overlap a little bit with your lighter color. Grab a paintbrush and some water and swirl around where the two colors meet. If the paint is still pretty saturated with water, you can even add a little bit of salt. Salt adds an interesting textural effect when it's done, which is perfect because the marker and water blending is a little bit trickier to do. So here is my salt, and I'll just go ahead and sprinkle some on the surface. You can add a good amount of salt, just make sure that you're not piling it on the paper. Once it's completely dry and not shiny anymore, you can rub the salt off. You'll want to do this over a trash can. And ta-da! Look at that cool effect it adds. The last option that you might choose is watercolor. Make sure that you're starting with your darkest color and you're only doing maybe a third or a half of the iris at a time. Add the darkest color around your edge. Once you've gone about a third of the way or halfway, because we don't want it to dry before we're done blending, you'll rinse off your brush, and with a little bit of clean water, you'll just stretch that color out a little bit. This is where we're going to mix a little bit of the second color on top of. So again, I'll rinse off my brush. I'll get my second color, which I'm going to actually be using yellow-orange. And I'll overlap just a little bit in that area where I lightened my original red-orange. Swirling your paintbrush around where the two colors will meet will help you to blend the two colors. And of course, blending works best when the paint is still wet. That's why we're working on a small section at a time. Once again, I'll rinse off my brush, and with some clean water, I'll stretch my yellow-orange out just a little bit so that I can blend the yellow into that area next. Once I'm ready for my yellow, I'll rinse off my brush, and with yellow, I'll place it right in the middle and then swirl a little bit over the edge of the yellow-orange. From here, I'll work backwards. I've added my yellow already, so I'll move into my yellow-orange and then eventually my red-orange, following all the same techniques I did the first time. Make sure to use the tip of your brush when you get into those little areas. Today we drew with pencil, outlined in Sharpie, and colored in the iris, which is the colored part of our dragon's eye. When you're ready to color the rest of our dragon, you can go ahead and move on to my next video. Let's color our dragon eyes.